want to discuss Lucas Paqueta today, and in particular his form at the moment and what's going to happen with him next season. But in the process of doing that, we've sort of got to try and imagine who's going to be manager next season. So we're going to use, as an example, I'm going to use the example of David Moyes, because he's the guy in the hot seat at the moment. But I don't particularly want to discuss David Moyes' future, if that makes any sense. It's just hard for me to think about Paqueta next season, and then I would almost have to do an individual thought for if Will Still was in charge, or if Arne Slot was in charge, or if Rafa Benitez was in charge, and what would they individually do with Lucas Paqueta? It becomes a bit of a headache, really. I mean, the other thing is, I don't really want to overly discuss David Moyes' future yet, because I still think it's up in the air. Do I think he'll be retained? Yes. You've only got to look at the last couple of days. There's a lot of backslapping going on. There's a lot of, I was going to say self-flagellation. It's not that. Self-congratulation going on. And I just don't think we're over the line yet. I just don't think we know. It reminds me of, I think was it a touring car? Maybe it was a NASCAR, something like that. I watched a few years ago. It's quite a famous clip. You can find it on YouTube. And the guy basically starts doing the celebration lap. One lap early before the race is done. So basically, the race was meant to be 70 laps. He did 69. He thought he'd done 70. He slows down, expecting to take the checkered flag. Didn't even look at the checkered flag. He's waving. He's still driving. He's waving. So everyone, yeah, thank you. And everyone's going, and all gone past him. So I am a little bit aware of that. I don't want to particularly talk like we've won the Conference League yet, like we've stayed up, but, and I think they're two separate things as well. I still think the Conference League's got a little way to go. Bloody well, hope we do. And I think it's likely we'll stay up. Our goal difference is so good now. But before we discuss David Moyes, because I do think it's a topic, by the way, I think if David Moyes were to win the Conference League and keep us up, I think there's a really strong case for him being retained. I think the case probably becomes stronger than for him leaving, him being dismissed, or whatever the case may be. But we're not there yet. We don't have all the evidence, so I just don't want to overly discuss it yet. So for the purposes of this video, David Moyes is still in charge, and David Moyes is in charge of Lucas Paqueta. And it was really interesting to listen to what David Moyes said about Lucas Paqueta after, well, I was going to say after the most recent game, but after what's been, I think, 3 really strong performances from him. And that's, he said, I thought that's what we were getting when I bought Lucas. What that puts to bed almost immediately is the suspicion that David Moyes didn't buy him. I think that's an easy stick that we probably use too often. Don't get me wrong, I do believe there are players that Sullivan has bought. In fact, on this very channel, agent Barry Silkman, who does a lot of representing of West Ham, and actually, well, it was actually Silkman that was the agent for the deal that brought Paqueta here. Silkman was the guy that brought Thomas Souček here. So if anyone knows, it's going to be him. Even Barry Silkman said on this very channel that Sullivan does like to do a little deal. We call it a Sully special. Sullivan South American special or whatever. But so I think it's easy to think that almost every deal that doesn't go well, oh, that's Sullivan interfering with David Moyes. I don't think that's the case. David Moyes himself has said that he hasn't had any interference from the board. Those are David Moyes' words at all. He said in that Diary of a CEO podcast, he said he doesn't think that would work. And now he's pretty much said, that's what I thought I was buying when I bought Paqueta. I mean, you know, that's pretty unequivocal words, really. And what did he think he was buying? It was goals. Goals and assists and someone really creative. I've not had an awful lot of sympathy with Moyes when Moyes has said all season, oh, you know, new players take a long time to settle. The reason I've had a lot of sympathy, it seems to be far worse of an issue at West Ham. I mean, I'm not going to go into individual examples of every club, but you could make an example for every club, I guess, of players that have come in and not performed well, who've come over from foreign leagues, but also there are a hell of a lot of players who come over and start performing well instantly, straight away in their first season. So I think it's a bit of a weak excuse. However, it does look as if at least Paqueta has started to bed down now, and he's shown what absolute quality he's got. He's a magnificent player, and I'm pretty excited about what he can do for the remainder of the season, particularly to see him played up top closer to Antonio. It's quite nice to see the evidence of your own eyes when you're seeing him play like that, then hear Moyes say it, oh, we tried to get him close to Antonio in this game. Well, okay, that's great. If that worked, then let's see a little bit more of it, because for too often at West Ham we see the striker is isolated. So I'm pleased about that, and I'm pleased about what I might see with Paqueta in the future, because he is prodigiously gifted. He is an outstanding player. And I do think he's got a lot of the qualities to thrive in the Premier League, but it's sort of like that thing, if you've got to earn the right to play. And I think what that means in Premier League terms is you've got to win your physical battles. And he does, and I think he has. And I think he's now more aware that he's about to be dispossessed, so he shields the ball better, he turns his back on it. He's always had the ability to do that, but I think maybe the pace of the Premier League did shock him a little bit. I also think it's fair to say probably wasn't David Moyes' first choice. Well, it wasn't. It absolutely wasn't. David Moyes wanted to get Jesse Lingard in a free and sign Onana as a defensive midfielder. He wasn't ever expecting to spend big on a more attacking player. He was getting that for free with Jesse Lingard. And I also think that his second choice was Nunes, who went to Wolves. We had a bid accepted. He just didn't want to go. He wanted to go and join, well, basically the Portuguese Revolution of Wolverhampton Wanderers, which is fine. So I think it's fair to say Lucas Paqueta was probably third choice. So, I think there's a little bit of leeway needed there in terms of him settling. But I feel he really has settled now. He's up to the pace of Premier League, and he's earning that right because he's battling. So he battles before you get to see the skills, and he's a big lad, isn't he? Do you know what I mean? If you've seen him in the flesh, you've seen him live as well. He must be 6 foot, 6'1", something like that. Big lad, so he's not going to get bullied. He's not one of like little diminutive. He's not Daniel Podence. Do you know what I mean? He's not going to get bullied, basically. Don't know why I used him as an example. But really, really, really good from what I've seen of him so far within that. What was interesting, though, and I didn't know this. I sort of did know he was at Flamengo, and I did know that he went to AC Milan first. It didn't really work out, but I didn't understand the full story. So he was a superstar at Flamengo. Lucas Paqueta was an absolute superstar to such an extent that AC Milan agreed to pay 35 million euros for him. Now, that doesn't sound an awful lot if you've got, excuse me, sort of two European clubs buying between one another. But when you're going and buying a player from South America, that's big money. That's bigger money to pay to a South American club. And apparently, as I understand it, Dortmund were in for him, Paris Saint-Germain were in for him, as actually AC Milan that got him. 35 million euros. Now, I think that was in January 2019. 18 months later, they'd sold him. Excuse me, let me just have a sip of me tea. Hammer's Chat mug there, of course. 18 months later, they sold him for 20 million euros. They lost 15 million euros. We think we're bad. We talk about Sebastian Haller. We talk about Vlasic. They've done exactly that, AC Milan. It didn't work out. And they thought he just didn't settle. He didn't fit in. And it does make you wonder if maybe they'd have persevered with him. Maybe they would have got the player that they thought they were buying. Anyway, the rest is sort of history. He went to Olympique Lyonnais. And they lost significant, lost 15 million euros on him. Went to Olympique Lyonnais, played really well. Got the move to West Ham, but it's taken him a while to settle at West Ham. It's a little while to acclimatise. Don't think it's easy. Particularly not over here, and it's pretty grim at the moment. Over here, it's been a pretty cold winter. It's pissing it down all the time at the moment. So I think maybe that played a part in it. But anyway, what I am interested in, because I do think he's absolutely brilliant, is how are we going to get the best out of him, because he's developed a real partnership now with Declan Rice. That's getting better game after game. It's great, but it's sad. It's great because it should be partnership good enough to keep us safe. That's great. It's sad because, well, not keep us safe, may well propel us to win the Conference League. It's sad because Declan Rice is going. So I do believe what David Moyes, this gets to the David Moyes bit, I was talking about at the start of the video, I do believe what David Moyes does next, very, very important. Very important. With who he decides to buy next season. Because I don't think you get away with playing Souček in that. I almost think you're never going to get somebody as good as Declan Rice. I think there's very, very few as good as him. If any, doing everything that he does. So I almost think you've got to buy two players. And I think that's what we got. I think that's the space we got in the team. I think with the money, David Moyes has to replace Souček and he has to replace Declan Rice. But we've already had this massive bedding in and settling in period with... I think you'd have to say at the moment it's only really... No, okay, let me be totally fair. I was like, let's say Paqueta's settled. Should we say Emerson's settled? And to an extent, a Gerd. The rest, it's hard to make a case for necessarily Kehrer, Cornet, Areola, Scamacca. It's harder to make a case for some of those. Maybe Flynn Downs has settled, but he's not quite found a place in the team. But you get what I'm saying here. David Moyes not got that luxury for next season. David Moyes not got the luxury to buy 2 midfielders and wait 6 months for them to settle. I don't want to go through all this again. I'm pretty sure nobody wants to go through all this again. That took too long. We spent 200 million. There's no way we should have been as crap as we were for so much of the season. And whilst it's nice it's turning now, we can't go through this again next season. At some point, our luck will run out. Look, it's what David Moyes said. Wants to qualify for Europe every season. If we qualify for Europe this season, okay, it will be great. It won't be lucky because we'll have won a European trophy, and those are the rules, and that's how you qualify. We can't rely on that. If what we want to do is qualify for Europe each season, then we've got to sort of do so by being in the sort of top 7 in the league, right? Which is not easy, but if that's what he wants to do, that's what he's got to do. He can't rely on winning a European trophy every season. I mean, it's just going to be, it's impossible. Yeah, well, I was going to say no one does that. Sevilla maybe did that for a while, but you know what I'm saying. So he's got to get that right. So the midfielders that he brings in, maybe they've got to have Premier League experience. I'm not saying don't bring players over from overseas, but maybe, just maybe. I don't know. I think it's very, very interesting what the future holds. What I do think is the remainder of the season is very, very important for Lucas Paqueta, because I think that Paqueta probably didn't enjoy his football for the first time at West Ham. First 2/3 of the season, not so good. I wonder if now he's thinking, actually, I can play in this team. I can express, it's what creative, not just creative footballers, it's what creative people are like. They want to express themselves. And he's probably thinking, oh, I can express myself in this team now. So if he finished the season strongly, he's not going to be in such a hurry to Scarpa. Because I do think that there have been times this season when a lot of the players might have been on the phone to their agents saying, get me out of here. Some of the football was so bad, it's not what they were signed up for. And it seems to have changed for whatever reason. Lots of different reasons, different video, I guess. But we've started to press a little bit more. We've started to have a little bit more adventure. We've started to score more goals. Is the most basic way of saying it. And they're going to enjoy playing in that. He really is. Taking penalties, winning penalties. He's scoring goals. He's setting up goals. His passes are starting to come off. His teammates are starting to read what he's doing, making those runs, knowing that Paqueta's going to aim for them, try and find them. He's a hell of a player, Paqueta. I mean, he's really good. I think if we would agree, let's say that it was 190, 200 million that we spent on everybody, including Ings, by the way, I think a lot of those players have decreased in value. And I was worried that Paqueta might have been one of them. Do we get £35 million for Scamacca now? No. Has Cornet decreased in value? Yeah, probably. A Gerd? Probably. Kehrer? A difficult one with Kehrer because he was only 10 million anyway, but he's on big wages. I think, Downs probably has increased in value, but not by loads. But I did think there's been a lot of the time this season, Paqueta might have found himself in a similar situation that he was in AC Milan, which is actually his value had dipped. Now I'm not so sure. Now I'm looking at a £50 million player, which is what he was. And if he can start to dominate Premier League games, I think you're looking at even better than that. So it'll be sad to lose Declan Rice, because Declan Rice is a world-class player. But it looks like we might have another world-class player in Lucas Paqueta. That's great. What is going to be vitally important, though, is who David Moyes chooses transfers in to play alongside him.